All right, welcome to the PCSgrades webinar. We are going to be chatting today about who wants to learn to do a DITY move like a pro. We're going to be talking about those PPMs, those DITY moves, and we have with us today the pro, Mallory Pevoto, also known as DITY Mama. So thank you, Mallory, for joining us today.
Thank you for having me.
Of course. I'm Lizann Lightfoot. I'm the senior content editor here at PCSgrades. I'm a Marine Corps spouse and a mom of 5 kids and a published author. Now, we've lived at 6 military bases and done a total of 4 DITY moves. But Mallory, why don't you go ahead and introduce yourself and tell us a little bit about your military background and your DITY move experience?
Absolutely. So I'm an active duty Army spouse for a little over 14 years. We actually are high school sweethearts, so we've been together for about 19, but married for 14. I'm currently a stay-at-home mom to 3 kids. They are 8, 6, and 4. We are from Texas, but currently living in Colorado. And this is actually the second time we've been here in Colorado. And for my DITY move experience, we have PCS'd 11 times and lived in 13 homes in 13 years. And all of those have been full DITY moves.
That is wild. Yeah, I know.
That's
You
how I
all
got
heard that correctly. That was 13 DITY moves for Mallory and her family. So obviously lots of experience learned along the way, and we are going to be delving into all of that today. So we want to hear throughout this webinar your questions, whether you're planning a move in the future, whether you've done a DITY move yourself and have some feedback or questions, or whether it's something that you would never consider and you do not want to move that way ever again. That's fine, but we want to hear from you who are watching. Go ahead and tell us if you've done a DITY move before or if you are considering one next year. And if you're tuning in to us live, you can also give us a shout out, what duty station you're in, and you know what, let's share whether or not it is snowing at your place right now, because I'm hearing that that's happening some places.
It's snowing right in front of me.
It's crazy. So
Mhm.
thanks, Yvonne, for tuning in. And Mallory, we're all so curious about what got you started in the PPM or DITY move process. And I need to do the quick disclaimer that the official term has been changed to PPM, which is a personally procured move.
Yes.
But some of us who have been around for a little bit learned to call them DITY moves or a do-it-yourself military move. So for the purpose of this webinar, we're going to use those terms interchangeably.
Yes.
But PPM is the official DoD term.
PPM that doesn't sound as good as DITY.
It's got that redundancy of a PPM move, like the M is already there. So
Right.
anyway, for our purposes, Mallory, how did you get started with DITYs, and have you done a traditional military move before?
So how we got started was, honestly, I knew nothing about military life. So my husband and I got married like the week after we graduated from college. He commissioned, and then 2 weeks later we're off to our first duty station. And at the time, there wasn't a lot of information just out there, and we didn't have iPhones at the time, anything like that. So honestly, I didn't know. My husband was like, "We don't have very much. Let's just load it up, drive it to New Jersey." That was our first duty station, was in New Jersey. And so that's just kind of how we got started. So I didn't really know that there was anything else to do. But as we continued to do it, the easier it got in a way, and it just became just secondhand. Like it was almost like, okay, I already know what to do. Why, let's just keep going. So that's what got us started. And then obviously the profit, because we didn't have kids, we didn't have a lot. We were, making a little bit off of the moves, and it just seemed to work. So we continued doing that. And then as we added kids on, we realized that we enjoyed it, or we liked it even more, honestly. Like a lot of people will be like, "Oh, I don't want to DITY move because I have kids." It's like, I want to DITY move because I do have kids, because of the shorter transition times and all of that. So that's just kind of how we got started and why we kept going. There was one time though that I was like, let's let the government contractors move us. And that was, we had a 4-week notice move. We weren't supposed to move. We had 4-week notice. I had just had our second baby, a 2-year-old, and my husband had just gotten home. He was TDY. And I was like, I don't think I can do this. I had never done it with a newborn before, and all of that. So we were like, okay, we'll let them do it. And as it would happen, they were like, actually, we can't fit you in. We don't have any availability for like the next 4 weeks. And I was like, you know what? We're just going to do it. So that was our 7-day Diddy move. So from
Oh
the time I
my.
started packing till, we left was 7 days and I had a little baby. So it kept our streak going. And honestly, it kind of built the confidence even more in our Diddy moves because I was like, okay, we did that, right? It's just like once you do it during different seasons of life, you're like, okay, this is manageable. I can do it. So it just kept our streak going and we just continued ever since. So I think that was our 7th PCS when that happened.
That is so crazy and frustrating. But I can relate. We had a similar experience, not with a newborn. So I don't know that I could have pulled it off, but we did have to do a 7-day packing PPM, load the truck and go situation. And it's not unheard of in military life. I've had people argue with me after the fact that no, that's not how it works. They give orders sooner than that. Like they're supposed to.
You're right.
So experiences can certainly vary. So was there ever, besides that time, has there ever been a time that you did not want to do the Diddy move, or have you always kind of been motivated to stay with them?
Well, I've been pretty much motivated always to stay with them. If anyone is the one who's like, are you sure? It's my husband. He's probably the one that I have to convince a little bit more. But at the same time, I'm like, you're not even here for a lot of them. So we just kept it going. Yeah.
Okay. Excellent. And again, those of you who are tuning in live, we really appreciate you and your support. And Mallory is very happy to answer your questions. So
Absolutely.
We're going to get into some of those nuts and bolts of the Diddy move, the PPM process. And as we go along, if you have any questions where you want her to elaborate or speak more to your specific situation, go ahead and ask us in the comments and we will try to address that. So obviously, after 13 moves, I mean, you have a system and a process now, right? I know maybe the timeline is a little different sometimes, right, but in general, in that pre-move phase, what are some of your strategies and your priorities just to kind of approach a Diddy move and to get the house and get the family ready for it?
Right. So first off, pre-move, I mean, I think it's important to even sit down and talk with your significant other, your spouse, and say, is the Diddy move even right for us? Right. So I think that's the first thing you need to address pre-move is, are we in the right season of life? Do we have, usually a lot of Diddy moves need to be, door to door. Do we have availability? What does storage looks like? So before you even start the pre-move, it's just like, let's talk about what our family goals are and if this is even, if we can even do one. So I say start there. Next for pre-move is budgeting. And that's huge, I think, especially for a Diddy move. And that will also help you decide if you can or not, right? So kind of go through your budget. How much weight do you have? Where are you going? Kind of getting your estimate for what that looks like. You can kind of decide from there, like, is this financially doable? So get a budget in order. And then if you're like, we're going to Diddy, we're going to do this, again, start budgeting, start seeing where you can outsource, making your reservations, things like that. You don't need orders to make reservations. You do need orders to actually pay for these reservations, like to have your receipts. Your receipts need to be with your orders. But there's a lot that you can do in your pre-move just to get ready. Because I know Diddy moves feel so intimidating, but it's like if you can do all of these things beforehand, these little things, like start gathering supplies. There's so many things that you can pack in advance too. You might not know the date you're moving. You might not have your orders yet, but you know what? You know you're moving, right? So there's little things that we can do to prepare for that moment so that when the actual orders come, when you're down to 4 weeks before you move, you already have all of that stuff in line and you can just focus on packing your home and transitioning your family. So that's pre-move.
Yeah. And just to elaborate on some of that. So it sounds like your go-to method has been to rent the truck in advance. Mm-hmm. Do you typically do a U-Haul truck or a budget truck, or, do you have a preference?
So I definitely have a preference, but again, it goes back down to the budget of because every move is different. No moves will be the same unless you're like going to the exact same spot with the exact same amount of weight. So I'm sure you will probably go through this, but for a Diddy move, you get like one lump sum and it's based off of your weight and the shipping rates of your location or your distance. And so that is what you will receive for that. So it's taking that and saying, okay, we have to stay under that, right? So even though I prefer shipping containers, like U-Pack is my favorite.
Yes.
There's Estes Moving, there's Pods. Those are all so great and convenient, but sometimes they just don't make sense financially. So sometimes we have, I think about 7 moves we've done U-Haul. So we've driven our own, and then the other ones we've used U-Pack.
Okay.
But every move we sit down and we're like, all right, where are we going? How much do we have? What makes the most sense financially? So I think that's how we usually come down to it, but definitely prefer outsourcing what I can.
For sure. It's so smart. And we've had a mixture of both as well. I actually learned about the U-Pack and those ABF trailers as an option from these webinars on PCSgrades. Someone mentioned them and I had never heard of that before. I didn't know it was an option. I thought it was either drive your own moving truck
Right.
or let the military do it.
Right.
And for us, it's been a really great kind of in between. It does cost a little bit more, obviously, than driving your own moving truck. But for us, the peace of mind to have someone else drive it for 5 days across country was huge.
Yes.
So that makes a big difference. And I do want you to elaborate a little bit on some of the budget plans too, because people who are approaching a PPM or a DITY for the first time are not quite aware of who's paying for what when. So what do you need to plan for, and what savings and financial capability do you need to have to plan a PPM?
So I guess we could say that one of the difficult things about doing a DITY or PPM is that it's all upfront. You're paying for most of it unless you get pre-approved. I know that is a thing. It's not something that we've done. So you want to have that in savings. So you'll be paying for all these upfront. And then depending on when you turn your paperwork in, how long it takes them to get back to you, that is when you will be paid. So again, that's something to take into consideration. If you don't have the budget or the availability to go ahead and pay upfront, that makes it a little bit harder. But you do have to pay for it upfront.
Yeah. So I wanted to make sure our audience knew that, because even that government reimbursement, once you've turned in your paperwork and you've got your weights and you're all ready to go, it still takes them at least 30 days to process. And that's
right.
a full credit card billing cycle. So please be prepared for that.
Or at least paying the minimums for that. But
right.
You do a lot of great points, if you are able to do that on a credit card. Not saying, everyone should, but.
Right. All right. So that is the pre-move. So you've made your reservations, you have a truck or a trailer or a pod or something.
Or movers, if you choose to do movers or not, go ahead and get that squared away.
Exactly, right. So remember, that is an option. When you do a DITY move, it does not mean that you personally have to lift everything out of your house. You can hire your own movers. Thanks, Jenna and Sam, for tuning in. Great to see you guys. And so now we've talked about making those reservations. You've mentioned gathering supplies. Do you have a strategy for acquiring all those moving boxes? Are you saving and reusing? Are you gathering them from neighbors, or are you buying them new every time?
All of the above. Okay. I do a little bit of mixture of everything. If it's your first DITY move or PPM, you'll kind of like get a sense of like what you're going to need. Again, if you've never packed your house before, it's kind of like, what am I going to need? What I'm going to use? I would suggest get as many secondhand items as you can. So getting those boxes from your neighbors, going to the recycling centers on your military installations. Pre-COVID, I would go into like Walmart and some of these big stores, and sometimes during their stocking hours, you can call a bike shop and get a bike box if you need one for your bike. So definitely that's something you can do pre-move. Again, you don't want to be doing this like the week of your move. So this is something you can kind of look for in advance. I save boxes. If you're moving next year, this is a great time to save your boxes that you receive for Christmas, like your Target, your Amazon boxes, things like that. And I just start gathering here and there what I can. Anything that is really important to me. I have my china, I have all of that. I save those boxes. So anything you receive that you're like, I really want to keep this nice, like your TV, anything like that, you can save those boxes or buy fresh box. I call them fresh boxes, or go to so there's certain things I will not pack in a old box that's been handed down to me, right? Like that's where I'm putting my towels, my pillows maybe, but not my kitchen plates. I will go out and buy boxes for that because you want them to be sturdy, because you do want to pack them well inside your truck so nothing breaks. So it's definitely a combination of all of it. And again, the first time you do it, it is a little tricky. It is a little confusing. You don't really know, and that's okay. And that you go into it knowing that just you'll kind of get a feel for what you need as you go. Just start gathering here and there.
Yeah. And I love that U-Haul, at least, and probably some of the other companies, I know that if you buy boxes new from their store, you can just bring them right back if you don't use them. So
I prefer
always that option.
The Amazon bundles, because once you receive that bundle, it's like, well, I don't need 20 small boxes. I need more large. Well, you're stuck with those 20 small, so I like the flexibility of that. with you
That's
all.
great. And we did learn, I think we've done a mixture of sometimes getting the random hand-me-downs from the commissary. You can get a lot of actually used boxes, but they're going to be all different shapes and all different sizes.
Mm-hmm.
And so the drawback of that is loading the truck with an assortment. So let's move on to talking about moving day itself. Okay, you've got, I feel like we skipped a lot. Maybe we'll go back and talk about the actual process of packing out the house. But it's moving day. You've got your house packed. You've got your moving truck or your pod or your trailer there.
Yes.
What is your family strategy for approaching moving day on a DITY move?
So moving day on DITY Move. So a lot of the strategy comes in before that. So staging your home for not only packing, but for loading is huge. And that's something that we definitely learned the hard way. It probably took us 7 years until we were like, this is what works. But staging your home, and we are doing a little bit of staging the day of as well. But that
Okay.
is making sure, everything you want loaded first, or you want loaded first is in the back. Or how am I saying that?
The back of the truck is
Yes,
loaded.
the back of the truck is this, so kind of staging your home. So anything that needs to go in the back is in the back, where your furniture is ready to go. So that's going to be the base of your loading. So just kind of making sure everything's where it needs to be. And like you were talking, those little miscellaneous boxes, those like oddly shaped ones, those have a little section as well. So it's like, oh, there's a random spot that could fit this size. So just kind of having the home staged is so helpful. And and especially if you have friends or even if you hire movers, it makes it go so much faster because again, especially if you hire people, you are paying for that time. So the more that you can do in advance to like stay organized, the less you have to pay, and just the more smoothly it goes, and the better your truck is packed. So that's kind of the game plan on that. Sometimes the kids are with us, sometimes they're not. It just kind of depends on where we're at and the availability of help and support that we have. So yeah, that's what we go into it. Just all right. My husband and I usually help load as well. So I say be involved in either way. If you're have movers or not, just be involved in that. So
Yeah, because you know your things and you're probably going to be more aware of what's in each box and want to take care of each box more so than a mover who's just like, this is a size medium box. So,
but that's the good thing about staging is you're like, this is my fragile boxes. These do not go on bottom.
right.
These are my heavy boxes. These need to go on the bottom. So just kind of being involved and being prepared ahead of time. So usually moving day is pretty smooth if we're able to do everything that we can in advance. But then of course there's moves where you're just still cramming stuff in boxes, right? Let's not pretend like that doesn't happen on the day of. We're just like, let's get it out.
Absolutely. And also when we say moving day, my family does not load our trailer in one day. I don't know what your usual timeline is, but
we do it about 3 hours. Like we do it in one day. Mm-hmm.
Okay. Then you definitely have a system because we are much slower.
Sometimes we hire, again, it just goes back to budget availability. Weather is a huge deal for us because if it's pouring down rain, I'm not going to hire people to come and just stand there when they can't move our stuff. So we'll usually do that. So I know it's not an option for everybody to be able to do it, but
that's one of the other perks of the
right.
DITY move that we're going to get into is that flexibility and controlling your timeline.
Right.
Hey, we got a user tuning in from Germany. Thank you so much for watching. And we talked about moving day, packing the trailer or packing your moving truck. And now, do you guys also have a strategy for unloading and moving into the new home?
We do for the most part. So a big deal. And this is a tip I think everyone should use, even if you don't do a DITY move, but have your open first boxes. So the boxes that you pack last are the things you're going to need in your home first. So usually we'll be packing that up, the last day, but that's anything you're going to need, like your necessities. If they don't come with you in the truck, those are going to be put on the truck last. We usually set those separately aside, and then we move those in ourselves at the very end because we know we're going to need those first. So we pull those boxes out. That's everything that we're going to need to live. So let's say we're just exhausted. We're like, we can't unpack a thing. We don't want to go through it yet. We have everything we need to live for the next 24 hours type of thing. And then I think unpacking it really just depends on your family and your priorities. So I know a lot of people will tackle different areas just depending on the needs of their family. But my personal favorite thing to do first is our kitchen. Because by the time we're in our new home, I'm like, I'm tired of eating out. I'm tired of being in a hotel. I want to be able to somewhat cook a meal as that night. So we'll do the kitchen, we'll do the living areas just because that's where our family spends a lot of time. And then the kids' rooms is really important to me too to unpack first, because that just brings familiar. It's more familiar to them. I feel like it eases them. It transitions them well when they see things that they're used to. Their rooms look very similar. I feel like that's very comforting for them. So those are kind of what we tackle first. Another tip for unpacking to make your unpacking day smoother is I love to make our rooms first night ready. And I feel like this is something you could do even if you don't do a DITY move. I could be wrong, but we do like to pack our first night essentials into our furniture. Nothing crazy heavy, but like we'll do like our sheets, maybe a pillow, anything that my kids might need, a sound machine. We'll pack those into our dressers, that when the movers come and they place those dressers into the bedroom, all I have to do is open that up. I have our sheets. I can set everything up really easily for the first night. And I feel like once we're set up for that, then we can start unpacking and doing things. Because the worst, I hate it when we haven't done that in the past. It's like you're exhausted from a day of unpacking and unloading. And then you're like, oh my gosh, where are our sheets? Where's this? Where's that? It just makes it for a hard night. So having your bedrooms first night ready, it's such a game changer. And it sounds so simple, but it's so helpful. To have your curtains, I usually do thumbtacks with curtains, unless I get those fancy blackout shades. I'll pack those in there and I'll just thumbtack some curtains up so that my kids can sleep better and just kind of prepare for that. So
that is so smart. I have not heard that before. I think I actually heard on your website your first night dresser tip, because I remember making a note of that during our last move. So thank you for all the tips that you've included. Mallory has an incredible Instagram. For those of you who do not follow her yet, you definitely should, especially if you are planning for an upcoming move. So lots of fun tips and great ideas on there. I do remember reading that one, and unfortunately I had not taken advantage of it because we were doing a door-to-door move, and I thought, we're just going to unpack everything. It'll be fine. Sure enough, we get here and run into some unexpected problems, and half of our furniture had to remain in the garage. And my son is running around going, where's my pillow? Where's my bedding? And we had taken everything soft and just stuffed it into random places in furniture, thinking we're going to unpack it all at once. It'll be fine. So that is a really great tip, and I wish we had used it.
Next time.
Yeah. So the final step of any PPM or DITY move, and kind of the whole reason that we go through this painful process, is the receipts and the reimbursement. And unfortunately, that also causes a lot of headaches and confusion. So having been through this so many times, Mallory, can you clarify how the PPM and DITY reimbursement process works?
Absolutely. And this is honestly more so my husband. So we definitely have different roles and different strengths. And his is definitely the paperwork, the receipts, and he handles all of that. But again, like we talked about, the money that you receive, you don't get dollar for dollar. So let's say you're like, our UPAC cost us $4,000. The military, they're not, finance is not going to be like, oh, well, here's $4,000 because that's what you spent. That's not how it works. Again, you have your lump sum that you should receive with your orders after you go into DPS, type that all in. Again, that's what my husband all does. I can't really give you details on that. You'll receive a number, and then your goal is to stay under that. So all your moving expenses, your movers, your truck, your supplies, is completely separate from, your hotel and all that. That's
Yes.
TLA, that's DLA, that, this is just what for moving, like your moving supplies, things like that for your actual physical move. And so your goal is to stay under that. Now you want to save all of your receipts, even your packing supplies. Let's say you're like, oh, here's some tape. Save that receipt, even for your tape. Anything that you buy, save it. You will submit that with your paperwork, with your weight tickets, with your, I'm sure even if you have never done a DITY move, maybe you've done a partial.
Mm-hmm.
I want to throw that out there. Even if you don't do a full DITY move, you could always claim a partial, even if it's just your vehicles and not your physical, but like the things inside your vehicles. So that could be considered a partial DITY as well. So anything that you are traveling with, you can get weight tickets for the things inside of your trailer or your vehicle. So you get all of those, you turn them in, and again, they're not going to do it dollar for dollar, but the thing is your profit is what's taxed, not your supplies. So all the receipts that you turn in for your supplies and things like that will not be taxed. So maybe you're not making exactly the amount back, but at least you're not, it kind of balances it out, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
So only your profit is taxed, and I believe it was 22%. I'm not sure. Don't take my word for the actual numbers. But any supplies you turn in is not included in that, so it will not be taxed, from what
Okay.
I'm understanding.
I actually forgot about that, the taxing of the income. Yes, you are
Yes.
taxed on the income
Yes.
of your government reimbursement on a PPM, which is a different situation from your standard government move. And I think another area where people get really confused is that when you do a government move, you are allowed a weight allowance, which is based on the service member's rank, so it's pretty much standard across the board. And if you go over that weight allowance, it's a huge deal because you're paying out of pocket for every pound.
Right.
Now, in a PPM, like you said, your service member is usually the one that goes into DPS and enters their estimated weight allowance, their family size, all these other details. And before you move, the government agrees to a number saying we will reimburse up to this weight for your family. But you only receive reimbursement on the weight tickets of your actual trailer. So understand that even if they're saying, oh, you would get, $10,000 for moving this many pounds, that's not a guarantee that your family is receiving a $10,000 PPM reimbursement. So it's so important to know your weight and to know, how much of your furniture has changed or been added since your last move. Do you guys have good strategies? I know now that you've done it so many times, you probably have a really good handle on your household weight, but do you have resources that you use for that?
For like our weight, like how do
With
we
estimating or guessing and trying to figure out where you're going to be this time.
honestly, it's just from our previous moves, and then just kind of being like, okay, have we added more? Have we taken away more? It's always a ballpark. We're not sure. I think this last move, we did about 14,000 pounds, which was a huge surprise to us because I think up until then it was 12,000 pounds. But again, sometimes the more weight you have for a DITY move, though, the better, because the more weight you have, the more you get paid.
Yes.
So more weight isn't necessarily a bad thing. It's just you want to be able to move your things without paying over what you are estimated to receive, if that makes sense.
Right, because
So
if you're renting a truck or a trailer, a lot of those are calculated by the length. So you need to know what size of a truck or a trailer are we going to use, and are we filling it up? Are we doing a half full? So
and
there
so
is a lot.
I'd say just look back, because even if you've never done a DITY move, if you've done any type of move, you can just see like, oh, what did we have then? What have we added? What have we taken away? And just kind of gauge it off of that. But yeah, it is really tricky the first time because you really don't know. And that's why I always say just like budget what you can, stay under as low as you can. Hopefully you'll be pleasantly surprised, and you won't be paying as much as you think, or you'll have more weight than you think. But that again is something to go into, is like, is a DITY move right for us? Let's say you don't have much weight at all, and covering the truck and all of that isn't even worth what you're going to receive. You might have to pay out of pocket for that. So that again is just going back and saying, how much do we have? How much do you think we're going to make? And just making your decision on if that's the best choice for your family at this time. So.
Absolutely. And there are some estimator tools. I know there's one on the Military One Source moving site, which used to be move.mil. Yes. Now it has migrated over to Military One Source. So you can use their tool. That has been pretty helpful for our family. You can actually go room by room and say, we have a queen size bed here, and we have a couch that's this long here. And they'll start telling you what your weight estimate would be. You can find similar tools on, if you're going through any of those third-party companies like U-Haul or Pods.
That's true. But also to know that it will be different too, because I try to stick to the military ones. So the real one's going to be, the one that they give, is, because you can use third party ones, but just know that it might shift. You might not have as much weight as you think, or you might have more than you think, because they might not be as accurate unless they're an actual certified like military website that's going to give you that information.
That's a really good point. All right, well then let's start discussing, now that you've done this so many times, from your takeaway, what are the pros and the cons of a PPM and a DITY move? We've been dropping some into the comments here. These are PCSgrades blogs where we've talked about some of these pros and cons before. If you're trying to figure out, like Mallory said, whether this is the right choice for you or whether you want to do the more traditional military move this year, there are definitely pros and cons. So what have those been in your experience?
So the pros definitely is the control over your move. maybe that might not be a pro for some people. That's a pro for me. It's just being in control, being able to decide to interview different places, find my own movers, just have control over that. It's not, I know where my truck is at all times. I know where my things are at all times. The control is huge. So that's definitely a pro, especially from my friends that I've heard. I hear stories. I know that not all moving experiences are terrible, but you do hear the stories of, oh my gosh, our things have been there for 2 months and they won't get back to me, that type of stuff. So that is a pro of a DITY, is that you are in control of your stuff. You get to decide. So that's a huge one. Again, personally interviewing companies, movers, you can just go through and be like, what do you provide? Like, you can make your decision. You have more of a say. Oh, you're not doing a great job. I'm going to have to hire somebody else. You can't necessarily do that always with a government contract move.
So true.
Picking. So that's a big deal. You're able to start planning. I feel like you can get a lot done in advance. And again, you have more control over that. You're not just prepping and worried, are they going to undo all that I just did? It's like, no, you can plan, you can pack, you can reserve, you can do all of that in advance. You don't need orders to like contact the moving company. All right, we have orders, we need to get scheduled. No, you can do all of that. There's a lower risk of your household goods being lost or damaged. Even though some people are nervous about, I'm packing it myself, what if I don't do a good job? I guarantee you're going to do better than some that might not care, right? If you have a very important piece that's been handed down for years, you're like, I'm going to pack that extra well, get a special box. It's less likely to get damaged than somebody who's like, oh, let me set this nice lamp in with the food processor. It's just kind of like your things are less likely to get ruined or lost. Some people, we talked about this before, but some people, maybe their moving truck does get taken, but that's very rare. Very rarely will you not know where your things are, and not many people will be touching your stuff, so that, it won't get lost as easily. The shorter transition time is huge, especially with kids. I know that a lot of people are like, well, I have kids. That makes the DITY move a lot harder. And yes, in some ways it does, but in some ways it's such a benefit too, because when you arrive at your new home, your things are with you or shortly behind you. You can start setting up. You're out of that transition of, oh, we're hotel living, oh, we're living in an empty home. The transition times are much shorter. You can get your family unpacked, you can get settled quicker. I feel like it just brings a lot of comfort and ease to our children when we are able to just do that faster. And that is a definite pro of a DITY move. Also, organization. I know that might not be important to a lot of people, but I love organized. You literally touch everything you own. You're most likely not to have those random boxes. Everyone talks about the box of random cords, and nobody, like, I don't have one of those, because why would I move with a box? Because you touch everything. You are so much more organized, and you just kind of know what you have. And I don't know, that's a good feeling for me personally. I just like the organizational piece. So those are my like big pro DITY moves. And they're definitely, so the cons. So there are some cons. I mean, I'm all about DITY moves, but I think a few of the harder ones are, like we talked about, your weight. Sometimes you just don't know. I feel like sometimes there are some surprises, and sometimes you may have to pay out of pocket, which is a huge con. That's, again, why it's so important to budget, to figure out where your family's at, what you're able to do financially, just in case. But that's a huge one. You might have to pay out of pocket, because you are paying for it up front, and depending on what you receive back, if it's not enough, they're not going to be like, oh, here's the extra funds that you spent. That kind of falls on you. So that is definitely a con. It's hard.
And just the fact that you don't know until you've done all the work, you've done all the packing, you unload into your new house and you turn in your weight tickets, and then you find out magically, here's what the government is actually reimbursing for this weight. And you could spend months of practice and time and not know what it's going to be.
And that's why I just say, like, start gathering and like finding what you can. Just do it as low as, it's so much easier to outsource, believe me, like it is, but sometimes you just can't, especially if you just don't know what your budget is. So you might have to do a lot of things on your own that you weren't planning on. So that's a con as well. Storage, I feel like that can be tricky. Yes, the government will pay up to a certain amount of storage at the government rate if you do a DITY move. But after that, it's on you if you need to store your items for how long. If you don't have a house to move into right away, you will be paying for the unloading and then the reloading and then the unloading again. So again, it just goes back to that planning and deciding if it's right for your family. So that can definitely be a stressful thing with doing a DITY move. And like we talked about, the upfront cost, just that's a con that you kind of have to think about, worry about more. It's definitely possible. I feel like it doesn't happen as often as you would think. People, having to pay a lot out of pocket. That's just, I feel like a lot of people mesh in the DLA with the DITY payment. I feel like that gets confused. A lot of people are, your TLE, they combine it, and it's like those are completely separate payments for that. So it's just like your moving expenses is the DITY payment. So just making sure those expenses are down. Everything else is separate. So if you have to pay out of pocket for, gas and
For
food,
shipping a second vehicle.
that has nothing to do with the DITY payment. So those are completely separate. So I feel like that is also something people get confused about. Like,
that makes sense.
moving is expensive in general, but a lot of your DITY and your profit from that is just from your moving expenses. So
yeah, and I liked how you clarified that the DITY kind of works best when you have the option to do that door-to-door timeline, which is not always a realistic part of our lives. So you definitely need to factor that in for your family. Even if you love the idea and you want to pack all your stuff and you want to do the work yourself, if you don't have a place to move it into, those moving trucks can go across the country almost as fast as we can. So we were almost racing our moving truck when we did a California to Mississippi move. We were like, all right, we got 5 days, we got to go. And we got there right before they did. But yeah, it only works if you have that kind of timeline. And if you're trying to do a different type of move where you either take a longer vacation in between or visit family, or if you don't have a house waiting for you on the other end, all of those factor into the PPM pros and cons. So,
and I mean, that's the great thing about the storage containers, because a lot of them do offer storage. So that's always a route to go. But I know this year, and of course we didn't move this year, which was very odd and a very strange feeling to not be moving, but they didn't do storage this year. Like U-Pack, those companies didn't provide storage. And I was like, oh my goodness, like that would be a challenge if you didn't have a home right away and they didn't offer storage. So I know that was hard for a lot of people this year.
All right. And I saw we had a comment from our friend Sam here. One of her pros of a PPM is that you get to play real life Tetris. So that's pretty fun, right?
That's my husband's part. He's very good at that. He loves that.
Mine too. So he stands on the moving truck and tells me what he wants, and then we bring him up.
There you go.
All right. So let's talk about some of your favorite resources when you're preparing for a move. I want to get into some of the nitty gritty, like how do you actually pack up and move your house? Because I'm sure a lot of our viewers have questions about that. And we sort of glossed over like, yes, and now your house is packed and ready to go.
Right. And now we're unloading.
You have, favorite labels, favorite boxes, favorite products that make the move a little bit more organized and streamlined.
Okay. So just for packing and tips in general, I'll start there. I always encourage people to not look at it as I have to pack my entire house, right? Because that's incredibly overwhelming. Even for me, someone who's moved so many times, if I think about the fact that I have to pack my whole house, it's very debilitating. It's very stressful. So definitely breaking it down into smaller goals. So I do have a resource for that. It's completely free. But it just talks about going, instead of thinking I have to pack my entire living room today, it's like, no, I'm just going to do my lamps, right? So breaking it down makes it more attainable. You're actually more efficient when you do it that way too. And then staging your home. So having everything prepared before you even start packing, like having your boxes out and ready and organized, and having packing supplies. I tuck it away throughout little areas in my home. So it's like, if I have 10 minutes, I can pack a box because my things are right here. I'm not scrambling around my house. Like, wait, where did I put my tape? Where did I put my boxes? So that's definitely a huge, what I always say when you are ready to start packing after you've gathered, is staging your home for that. And then just going section by section, little by little, because again, it's very overwhelming when you're like, oh my goodness, like I have to pack my whole house, right? Nobody wants to think about that.
Yeah.
As far as organizing labels, I love colored labels, ones that, these are my bedroom. These are my, this. So we tried the whole tape thing before. The tape, not my favorite. I don't like the tape. I like the labels. And also that I would love to use this opportunity to shout out some military spouses who actually have some awesome label companies for our moves. So Shay over at Team Box Ops, she
Mm-hmm.
has she's a military spouse. She has awesome labels that I have used the past 2 moves, and they are incredible. And I love the fact that there's even things that you can put on your door that color coordinate with your boxes. So if you have movers, if you have helpers, you're able to do that. I know that the Stressless PCS kit, that's also another awesome label company made by a military spouse. And I just think that's so cool that these women are like, they see a need and they meet it, right? Like, how can we be more organized for these moves? What can we do for this community?
Right.
So I think that any labels will work, but I think it's just awesome that if we can support our, military spouses in that. So definitely help keep you organized. I love all the products that they have.
For sure. We're dropping one of those, the Stressless PCS kit. We've got a link to it right in the comments, so you can go
All
check that
right,
out.
there you go. As far as like packing lists, so I actually have my own checklist that I give to that are free for my community checklist, and I have packing plans 4 week, 8 week, because you just never know what that looks like, and that again is just kind of breaking it down. So I'm a very much so a list person, so any type of like checklist is just really helpful for me to do that. Another military spouse is Liz over at List and File, so she also has awesome checklist for your moves as well, just to keep you organized. So I just think those are great options.
For sure.
What else?
Yeah, if you want to find some organization and some tips, our military community is the
I
place to
know,
go.
right? It's like there's a need, and it's like I'm sure someone has come up with that. So I think it's really cool that they provide all of that.
Yeah, and I love the idea of lists. My husband makes fun of me all the time for my list making propensities, but they really do help me visualize the
Right.
tasks that are left. And like you said, I can't just sit down and say I'm going to pack my whole house.
Right. Like, where do you even start? Right.
Right, or even the whole living room, like, that's not gonna happen in one day. But I do buy specific sizes and types of boxes, like, okay, I'm gonna do, the kids' winter clothes and also the DVD collection and also, like, the paintings on the wall.
Right.
And I kind of have a time block of, I know that I can do some things a month before I move because I don't need my china. I don't need
Absolutely. Your
the
holiday
wall
decor is a big one. You can pack in advance. Yeah.
Yes, and that's when you have the time and the energy, so you can take your time with the bubble wrap and, like, actually do it correctly.
Yes. Yes. That
Um,
it is super helpful.
yeah, and then it's more, I know the things that even in my kitchen, I'll divide up things that I don't need for a couple of weeks,
Right.
and then I've got kind of those last day dishes that we're saving. So I think the more that you can compartmentalize and plan either with a list or visually or by color codes or a binder, whatever is going to help your household. I'm a big fan of that.
Just breaking it down. Absolutely.
All right. And I see that we dropped both of those links that you mentioned, box ops as well. So
Yes.
you guys can go check out those
And
Millspout
List and
products.
File too is another great one for
Sorry, what was that?
List and File. She's a military spouse as well.
Okay.
Mm-hmm. She has checklists and all kinds of things to help keep your family organized during a move too.
That's right. I have been on her site. It's really helpful. So, all right. And we have a good resource at PCSgrades that is more so for military moves because this happens less often in a PPM or a DITY move.
Right.
But if you haven't joined the group Lost During My PCS, it's an incredible resource with thousands of military families. And many of them, like I said, are doing a military move using the government contracted movers.
Mm-hmm.
And as we all know, things get lost and separated from your shipment. And occasionally you get boxes for a family named Smith and your last name is not Smith. So then you're trying to find who this box might belong to. And it has just been an amazing resource for several years now, collecting all of these things that are lost or misplaced or people missing, and it reconnects items with their owners. We have so many cool success stories. So I really encourage you to check out that group, but it also has a good amount of general PCSing tips. So if you are moving yourself and you're working on this packing process, then you can find ideas and bounce things off of other spouses of how did you do this? Or I have this really awkwardly shaped piece here. What should I do with it? So we really want you to go check out Lost During My PCS. And before I go into the rapid fire round here, Mallory, are there any other general packing tips or resources or PPM information that you wanted to make sure you share with the audience?
I think I've hit all like the most important ones, or the things that I think are the most helpful, are the breaking it down, staging for packing and for loading, first night ready. Again, open first boxes,
Yes.
huge. Like having everything that you need just to like survive the first night or the first few nights will be incredibly helpful. And again, yeah, like I said, staging. So I think I've hit a lot of my favorite ones, unless you want to go into like more details. But that's all stuff that you can find on my Instagram, at my website. I have a lot of free resources just to kind of help keep you organized, and like I said, like to-do list, checklist, things like that. So
Perfect. Such a great resource. We really appreciate your knowledge. And I just want to remind people, when you're packing those first night boxes, again, you can look online and find some checklists. We have some on PCSgrades. Mallory probably has one somewhere on her site, but don't forget the tools in that first night box, because that's not what always comes to mind when you're thinking of towels and sheets and clothing.
or shower curtains.
Yeah, or the shower curtain. Yep. And the toilet paper and things like
Yeah.
that. But you're also going to want probably a step ladder and a screwdriver and a box cutter and a tape measure, because we go around and we measure our whole house out when it's empty before we unload things, just to double check, like, we were planning to put the couch here. Is
Right.
it actually going to fit here? So definitely check out her website and get those lists and get those resources. All right. So, Mallory, we do a fun little tradition here at PCSgrades on our webinar. We call it rapid fire. These are just some quick questions from our audience. You can give a quick or a longer answer if you want, but they should be pretty brief. Are you prepared for rapid fire?
I'm ready.
Okay. What do you wish that more families knew about DITY moves?
Well, I wish they would know more. I wish they would know that it is possible and they are doable. And I feel like moving is hard either way, whether you choose the government contractors or you do a DITY move. They're
Mhm.
both hard. It's just different types of hard. So it's almost pick your hard, right? You're just putting your energy into different things. So even if you've never done a DITY before and you're like, I could never do that. I would challenge that and say, you kind of already have, in a way, right? So it's just a few different steps and you're putting your energy
Mhm.
into different things. So it is doable with kids, with all of that. There is a way, if you're financially able to, if it's the right move for your family.
Absolutely. I saw one of our commenters had asked, 13 moves, how do you even handle all that stress? A regular move is stressful enough, but to do them as ditties. And I think that is what my response was too, that, I mean, they're kind of both stressful. So it's not like
Right.
you're packaging up all the stress of a military move and then adding on to it. It's just different.
Right. It's a different types of hard. And when you're doing it so quickly, it's easier just to kind of do it yourself, right?
Yeah,
It's probably easier for me that I have done them every year instead of waiting and waiting,
that is true.
because by the time I would get my stuff, I mean, we're already a few months in and we're leaving, a few months later. So it was just easier for our family to do it that way.
Yeah, you do what you got to do. All right, Mallory, what was your family's longest move to date?
Our longest one would probably be Georgia, so Fort Benning to JBLM up in Washington State.
Oh,
So that was a quick one. That was a 4-week notice one, and then less than a year later, we were back in Alabama. So we did that that whole stretch twice within a year. So
you're just getting to see so many beautiful parts of the country.
right, I love it.
All right, this one is not really something you can answer in a quick one, but go ahead and try your best. How do you prepare your kids for a move?
Oh, that is hard, because I do love talking about that. This is something I'm actually really passionate about, is our kids and transitioning them well, and helping them move well. And I actually do have a resource just for kids. So, and that kind of goes into, my process with my kids. But I definitely include them in their little packet. They each have a calendar. I let them write important dates, things that are important to them. They have a little packing checklist if they want to be involved, but it's just including them to the extent of their age, because I know all ages are different.
Mhm.
And then obviously some of them want to or not, but just finding ways to include them and making them a part of the process, however that might look to your family and your children, I feel like really helps bring closure. I usually have my kids list out friends they really want to say goodbye to so that we're not missing anybody. Because sometimes I might be like, oh, well, we already said bye to all your friends. And they're like, no, I really want to say goodbye to this person. But it's
Right.
just having that open communication, talking with them, including them, which I know is really hard, especially when you're packing a house, you're stressed, you're trying to meet your deadlines and do
Mhm.
what you need to do and make your reservations. But just taking that step back and including your kids can make such a big difference. I let them list out things they want to do before we move, like realistic, of course. Like, what are some areas, restaurants in the area or park? What are some things you want to do before we end our time in this home? And again, I just feel like that really helps bring closure. So this is something I could talk forever
Mm,
about, but
definitely.
that's just kind of it in a nutshell. But I think it's so important to include your kids to the extent that they can be included.
For sure. And it's like you said, it is going to be different every age.
Right.
We go through different challenges. So, absolutely encourage military families to read as much as you can from other military families when you're going through a move with kids, because we do have some great resources on PCSgrades. We've interviewed moms with different ages and different stages. And so, obviously, Mallory has some on her site as well.
And I would like to put a plug in for DITY Moves with kids, as I feel like even though you might think that would maybe some children, yes, would stress a kid out with all the boxes and all of that. My kids have actually found more comfort in the fact that like they're watching it happen. It's almost like we have time to process it as a family within 3 or 4 weeks of
Mhm.
kind of doing it together, instead of all of a sudden these strangers are in my home packing my things and then it's gone within 2 days. Sometimes even if you talk to your kids about, oh, this is happening soon, sometimes it's really hard for them to understand and to visualize it until they see it happen, and that's a very quick way
Right.
to process it. But during a DITY move, it's almost like that. It just gives us, it is hard. Sometimes we do have those hard conversations, but it just gives us that time to kind of process it as a family, and they actually see it happening and they're able to be included and involved. So even though it does make it hard, I understand that it can be hard with children of all ages to actually
Yeah.
bring it home. I see such a benefit in it for my kids, especially. So,
Yeah, and I think if they can get their hands on in any age appropriate way, if that
right,
means throwing stuffed animals into a box,
absolutely.
or if that means, like going through some of their clothes or some of their old toys and
Right.
sorting them out. By the time we got to our last move, my oldest is a teenager, and she's done this a couple times now in the past few years. So she took some of our moving tape and made herself a label that said, "My name is Professional Mover."
I love that. It probably is. Yeah.
She was carrying a lot of things onto the truck. So yeah, just getting them involved, it helps them process.
Right.
This is another one that I know you probably could talk about it more, but do you have any tips for doing a DITY move with pets?
Yes, I do.
Okay.
I'll keep this one shorter. I know that last one was long. So we do have one dog. She will be 11 this year, and bless her heart, she has lived in 10 homes in 9 states in the last so she has been through a lot. She has seen a lot, and I will when we start getting our luggage out and our boxes out. Yes, she does get really stressed, but we learned early on that, especially for I know all dogs are different, but creating like a safe space for her to go.
Mm,
So she has her bed, so we always create a safe space. Even the kids aren't supposed to go over there, but that's just her area where there's not all the boxes and all the chaos and all the clutter for her, and that seems to really help our dog for DITY moves specifically, because
yeah.
dogs get really stressed out. There's change, there's boxes, there's people, that type of thing is just creating that safe space for her. And also having a dog, it goes back, it's like kind of like with your kids, like you want to make sure they're up to date on everything, their medications, their vaccinations, their paperwork, everything like that can be done in advance. So that's really helpful instead of like the last minute, like, oh my goodness, we need to do this or do that with her. Just doing that stuff in advance, that's something that you can do. But DITY move specifically is just giving your pets a safe spot that it's just theirs
Right.
while
As
the chaos is
everything is
happening around.
changing around them. Yeah. I
Right.
love that. That's a really good idea. All right. And last question, your favorite lodging to stay in along the way when you are driving from one duty station to another?
So I feel like it's different every time. We don't really have a specific one. I know my husband, we do get points on some of them. I'm not quite sure which one. So we always try to look for those. But honestly, anything that allows pets and has a pool for my kids, like
It's good.
we're good to go. Right off the highway. like we just kind of talked about, it made me laugh because it's true. Like you have, like when you're doing a Diddy move, sometimes you have to get there before your stuff gets there. So we're really not like an explorer. I feel like we would choose differently if it was more like we're going to explore while we're kind of traveling, but we're usually just like, let's get there type of people. So
Mhm.
anything right off the highway. So we really don't have a favorite, honestly. It's just what can ever accommodate our needs as we're
Okay.
going. So
That's fair. And if you guys have any more questions for Mallory, she has been so helpful today, sharing all of her experience over 13 Diddy moves. But she's going to be around. So if you are watching this after it is live, please feel free to continue adding your questions, adding comments, and we'll make sure that she sees them and we'll try and answer them for you as well. But we're dropping several more PCSgrades links in there. We have so much material on our blog about planning for a move and how to pack and handling it with kids and handling it with pets. So I definitely encourage you to go to PCSgrades, check out our blog, check out the material that's written by and for military families. And Mallory, would you like to tell them where they can find you online?
yes, absolutely. So my Instagram is where I'm the most active, and that's Mama's on the Move. I see you have it down there. But that's where you're going to find like our packing videos, just military life, my family, our experiences, things like that. That's like the more fun, I feel like, area. But I do have a website. It's DITYMama.com. And that's where you're going to find like all the free resources, some information, frequently asked questions. And I do have a how to pack series. So let's say you don't want to watch a ton of videos of me packing my stuff. It's just kind of like laid out there for you and just encouragement. So that's what I have on
I
there.
love it. Well, thank you. And for those who are watching, I want to remind you that we will not have a webinar next week. It is Thanksgiving, so enjoy your time wherever you are, and hopefully you get some good food next week. And we will be back on November 29th talking with US Transcom about some very important updates and PCS questions for them. So just wanted to give a final thank you to Mallory of DITY Mama. It's been such a pleasure learning from all of your experience and all of your tips today. So thanks
Thank
for
you
your
for
time.
having me. I enjoyed it.